Hi everyone, welcome to this video on searching basics. So this video assumes that you guys have read through section 3.1 of graduate research methods in social work. We won't be reviewing things like different types of journal articles. We'll sort of assume that you already know some of that stuff based on the examples in that chapter. What we're going to work on here is just the basics, the step-by-step process of completing a research project in social work and searching around inside of the social work and other academic literature. The purpose of doing this is to figure out what we know about your topic, what we don't know about your topic, the empirical evidence, as well as different theories and other concepts that help us understand that empirical evidence. So you're going to have arguments that you want to make about your topic. You're going to need to learn what we know so that you can make intelligent arguments and that you can, for your own ideas, support what you think is true based on the empirical evidence and the theories about that topic. So you can also learn the designs and methods that are commonly used to study your topic. You guys are going to have to do a literature or a research project. So by looking at what other researchers have done, you might be able to copy some of their measures or think about like they might have had similar populations that they need to sample. So you can figure out what sort of settings they use for their study. And overall, the goal is for you to find an important question to study for yourself, but also it should be important to the literature. It should be something that we don't already know about your topic. So the 6 steps that are outlined here are just building queries using different keywords and Boolean operators, searching across multiple databases. We'll go over some of the main ones. Reducing the number of irrelevant results when you actually do those searches, so you don't get 1,000,000 results, you get a couple hundred, maybe 1,000, something that you can actually reasonably read. Exploring the references and citations for the articles that you find, and then downloading those relevant articles in a way that is organized and easy for you to browse and just make sense of. So the goal for building different keywords is for you to think of all of the different ways to say the same thing. So for example, if we're continuing with our example of social workers and police departments, I think if you just wanted to do a generic Google search, that would be fine. Google is a natural language search engine. And if you put in the query, social workers and police departments, it's going to be able to understand that you're probably going to want to search for things that have to do with social workers and police departments, and to ignore that word in, because I mean, that's just how people talk. It's not an important keyword in what you find. That's where things like, if you are a person who asks questions to Google or whatever search engine you use, it is a good idea for you to get in the habit of instead just using keywords and to talk like a robot. So rather than searching for social workers in police departments, you might search for social work police departments or social workers and police. So try and brainstorm the many different ways to say the same thing, whether police departments, maybe you want to insert corrections officers or parole and probation, or instead of social workers, you might want to talk about human service workers or child welfare workers. If we're talking about bias in police departments, you might want to talk about cultural bias, racial bias, implicit bias, all the other different kinds of biases. You also might want to talk about discrimination, which is different than bias, or about systemic racism, which is different than bias. So think about all the different ways, all of the different things that are kind of like the topic that you want to talk about and that might be relevant to your search. So the goal is not to find like one best query that you're going to use everywhere. The goal instead is to find a lot of different queries and a lot of different databases that you can explore. When you search for things in any database, a space between words means an and. It is looking for the thing, the word that came before it and the word that came after the space. And decreases the number of results. So if you did a search for social work and you did a search for police departments, there would be a lot of stuff. But the literature that talks about both of them is going to be much smaller. So and reduces the number of results or it increases the number of results. So you might want to talk about social workers or child welfare workers or other different kinds of social workers, maybe clinical social workers. So, or we'll make sure that all of those different, that your results talk about any one of those, not necessarily just one of them. Not also reduces the number of results, but that's pretty clear. So exploring multiple databases, a good place to start is just to do a generic like Google search or search Bing if you're a Bing person. The thing you're going to want to make sure of is that you find primary sources. In research methods classes and in graduate social work programs, you're going to have to cite primary sources. Go to the original author. If you find a New York Times or Washington Post article about a new study that was conducted, read the original article. So look it up on Google Scholar, look it up in a library database, whatever it is, get to the original source. Because the stuff that you're going to find inside of popular media, one, might be misinterpreted. Usually science reporters try and do a good job, but a lot of them aren't scientists, and you might find them on more popular websites rather than ones that are maybe necessarily more focused on data journalism or scientific journalism. The other place to look is Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is fantastic because it's free and you will actually have access to it after you graduate. Unfortunately, it indexes everything. So unlike library databases where there's like somebody in charge, there's somebody in charge of PsycInfo at APA, the American Psychological Association, and they decide what goes in the database and what doesn't go in the database. What is a good article? What is not a good article? What subject matter does it cover? There's nobody in charge of Google Scholar. It's just an algorithm. It is trying to index a whole lot of sources. So in addition to getting journal articles, you will also get unreviewed articles, things that are preprints or not published yet or not peer reviewed yet. You might get books, citations, just articles, just random PDFs on the web. It doesn't matter. Google Scholar indexes them all, and it relies on you as an information consumer to discern what is a reputable source and not a reputable source. Also, the bad thing about Google Scholar, and there's a great number of other things that you can do with it, it lacks a lot of the advanced search features of library databases, which makes sense. It's a free service, but it does make it limited in terms of like searching within the abstract or just other advanced search features like subject titles. Another thing to keep in mind are library databases. You're probably going to have to look at more than one. I know that our library database has a meta search engine, which searches most of the databases that we subscribe to. But it's a good idea for you to explore things like PubMed if you were looking in the medical literature, if you were looking at the social science literature, social science abstracts, social work abstracts. Looking at psychological information, PsycInfo would be very important to you. Academic Search Complete is a great place to start, especially since you can select specific sub-databases. And we'll have some more specific videos on those. Those have some advanced features. Unfortunately, they are subject to paywalls. You guys pay for access to these as part of your tuition, so you should take advantage of it while you can. Unfortunately, you guys will lose access to the library after you leave, and we'll talk about some ways around paywalls in a minute. But the first place we want to start here is reducing those irrelevant results. And there are a couple of different strategies. So most often what I see with students is search queries that are not well targeted. So that if I inputted them into Google Scholar or into a library database, I'm going to get thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of results. And that's just not feasible for somebody to scan through. And that's a sign that you need to reduce the amount of irrelevant results for your search. So the best place to start is by using quotation marks around phrases. A search engine does not know that you want to search for the subject of social work. It just knows that you inputted the word social and that you inputted the word work. And so it searches for both of them. So it'll return articles that talk about social science or social distancing or emotional work, like things that have nothing to do with your topic. Those should be further down, but they're still going to be in there. And by indicating things with quotation marks, you can make sure to get rid of those irrelevant results and reduce the amount of irrelevant results you have to look through. So you also want to narrow down the years, which most people know to do. Definitely search in the abstract. So this is not possible on Google Scholar. You can search in the title on Google Scholar, which is more restrictive and may exclude a lot of relevant articles, but you can be pretty sure that if something is in the abstract, that is what the article is about. So rather than it appearing once on page 23, if it appears in the abstract, it is probably correct. So searching specifically within the abstract, using the subject headings for library databases that are created by the people who use those databases and who make sure that the databases have relevant articles. They create those subject headings to help you in order to browse different articles that are related on the same topic. Also, a great place to start is to talk to a librarian. It is their job to do this stuff. and they're extensively trained in how to help you find things, please, please, please talk to a librarian. And also talk to a stakeholder or a community member. Those people may have not just the lived experience of what it's like, to deal with the topic that you're trying to study, but they also might have ideas about specific treatment approaches or things that are commonly done, or just jargon words, things that you may not know going into things, but are just words that are commonly used that might be useful for including in your database queries. The goal with reducing irrelevant results is to, one, have a number of results where you can reasonably skim through the abstracts. So how long does it take for you to skim the titles and skim the abstracts of the search results? So figure out how long that stuff takes and how much time that you have, and you need to reduce the amount of results that you have to a point where you can actually skim through all of those titles and abstracts to make sure that you're not missing anything important. The other thing is that you want to reduce the number of irrelevant results so that when you were scanning through those titles and scanning through those abstracts, that you were hitting way more relevant rather than irrelevant results. If you have a lot of irrelevant results, one, you might be wasting your time, and that time might be better spent using some of these or other features or other strategies for better targeting your search. Another thing you can do, especially after you've explored the literature for a while, is to conduct targeted searches. So you might want to look for a specific author. Authors tend to publish on the same topic for their careers. That's sort of what academics do. They might have more than one thing that they publish on, but usually people stick with a line of inquiry for a while. So look up and see if they have a domain or a website, or if they have their curriculum vitae on a website. They might also be hosted on the academic institution's website. So whatever university they're affiliated with, usually they will host their resumes or list some of the other articles or things that they have published. Another thing to look at is, are there specific journals that publish a lot on your topic? And you can either just go to the journal website and use the search feature there, or if you want to use some of the other advanced features, you can specify a journal in either Google Scholar or in a library database and use some of the other advanced features there. So for example, you might search within the Journal of Social Work Ethics and Values for something related to self-determination. Another thing to do that's really important, especially once you've found a highly relevant article, man, I want to read this article. Read the article. We're going to talk about how to annotate it and read some of the more challenging parts of it. But another thing you're definitely going to want to do is explore those references. And the review articles are particularly good for this. So systematic reviews, meta-analyses or meta-syntheses, literature reviews, the goal of those things is to summarize an entire body of literature on a topic. And so those, if you are looking for references about that topic, these are articles that are going to cite 50, 60, all of the relevant articles from that topic area. Another thing to do is, so if you're looking at the references, you are looking at the past. If you're reading an article from 2015, obviously the references in there are going to be from 2015 and before. If you are reading an article from 2015 and you want to figure out what are similar articles that are from the future, so who cites the article that I'm actually reading, go to Google Scholar, look up that article, and click on the cited by link. You will find all of the articles from after 2015 in our example that cited that original article. The next step is to download those relevant articles. So you guys probably want to download the PDF full text. This way you have a copy of it on your hard drive. I tend to store mine in a cloud storage thing, and I tend to organize them using just the normal folder system there. You guys might want to use things like Zotero or Mendeley, or even the saving system within Google Scholar to create folders and just organize your references. Those are great to use, but I tend to just use folders and like Microsoft Word documents that contain my notes on my search results. It's a good idea for you guys to keep a notes document so you know what you're doing as you go. You can keep track of different keywords and which searches you did, where you did them, so that if you needed to, for some reason, you could recreate them later if you needed to find an article that you, for some reason, lost, for example. The most important thing that people hit when they are trying to download articles is the paywall. And so the paywall is a source of information privilege. It is a source of inequity in access to information. It is, from a human rights perspective, not so great that most of our social scientific information costs a lot of money in order to access. There is a movement, a growing movement inside of social work and other social science disciplines to embrace open access and open science that make sure that regardless of ability to pay, everybody has access to scholarly material and social work knowledge in our discipline. Unfortunately, those practices are not widely adopted. So most of the articles that you were going to try to read cost money to access. Luckily, or just based on what we've done in the past, you have already paid for a lot of that access. So part of your tuition dollars goes towards your university library budget, and a lot of that budget goes towards the publishers that are indicated here for access to those journals. It's a really topsy-turvy place where professors and academics and researchers create these articles that are then reviewed for free by other professors and academics and then published. And then the person who created that research signs away their copyright to one of these publishers, who then charges their university a lot of money to access those things. It's kind of a really backwards system. So what are some ways around paywalls? One, look in your library. You should have access to most of the stuff that you need. If you don't, use interlibrary loan. Your university networks with other university libraries throughout the country and throughout the world. Someone has access, and it is somebody's job at your school to make sure that you get that full text PDF of that document. It may not be immediate, but that person will get you what you need as best they can. And if they can't, they'll tell you why they can't. So definitely put your information into interlibrary loan if you don't have access through your university immediately. Some other things to think about, and definitely some things that I've seen on the internet, are links to things like ResearchGate and academia.edu. So if you did a generic Google search for the article that you were looking for, you might find a link to the PDF on ResearchGate or academia.edu. Those are for-profit websites. Sometimes authors share their work on there. Other times that work is just sort of shared on there. The legality of these things is kind of in question. That's not really your responsibility though. That's the responsibility of the people who are running these websites and the people who are uploading articles to these websites. But at the same time, you should be aware that that these websites aren't necessarily the best players inside of the open access space. It's not necessarily a long-term strategy. In the long term, where we are going is much more towards open access. There are movements inside of the United States to move the default from publishing to open access and to try and address some of these structural inequities, because basically by locking Western and social scientific knowledge behind these large paywalls, we are essentially keeping those colonial practices of enclosing information and enclosing the knowledge commons so that people in developing countries, people who have fewer resources, cannot access the scholarship they need in order to create the change in their society that they need. And so that, from a human rights perspective, is pretty problematic. All right, so just some reminders at the end of your literature search. You're going to have to do this a couple of times. Budget some time to do this. You're going to have to use multiple queries using a lot of different keywords, sub them in and out. Use multiple databases. Use Google Scholar, but also use some of the other library databases and play around with ones that you see. Update keywords as you learn more. So for example, if we were continuing with our topic on social workers inside of the police departments, mental health courts might come up. So mental health courts are a system in which somebody who has a severe mental illness can go to a court similar to a drug court and then be assigned to mental health case management or mental health intervention with a social worker. And if they don't show up to those meetings, they can be thrown into prison. So as you learn more about sort of your topic, there might be specific interventions, specific policies that you want to study in detail, and it can be helpful to form a concept map about those things. Just remember that you might have to go back to starting at step one, that this is an iterative process, one that you might have to do over again as you learn more, and you're probably going to have to go back to step one regularly. And definitely revisit your working question. So as you learn more about your topic, you are going to have a different perspective on what you want to study, and you'll have a better sense of what you can add to that literature as a result of the research project you plan to do. each one of your research projects should push the literature forward at least a little bit. It should contribute something new. It should be important. It should be important enough for you to do, and important to the target population and the communities that you serve. Right. Thanks for watching.